Oh, to be a Baltimore Ravens fan. I'm sorry. No, I'm really not. You took Cleveland's football team, you made a hero out of a potential murderer, and you got 2 Super Bowl trophies out of it. So not a bad price to pay for your souls. I'm kidding. Not really kidding, kind of, maybe, sort of. But when you look at the Ravens, going into 2017, is another one of these teams I really didn't have a great vibe for, didn't really have a great feeling about, just because when you looked at it, you wonder where the production was going to come from on the offensive side of the ball. Is it still a team that devotes an awful lot of cap space to an average starting quarterback in Joe Flacco? A defense that is old in places and maybe not as good in other places as it has been in previous years. It was hard to really get a feel for this. This is one of these organizations where sometimes there's an overbelief in the system, in the infrastructure, and the belief in the strategy is greater than the Jimmies and Joes that you actually have on the roster. And you wonder at some point in time when drafting people and allowing them to leave in free agency and getting only compensatory picks in return, at some point in time that those chickens are going to come back home to roost and you're going to pay the price for that. Well, as 2017 got underway, you had a Ravens team who was really good defensively and absolutely terrible offensively. But even with that being said, you had a team that had 3 shutout victories this year. They had 3 shutouts in 2017. I don't care who you're playing. I do not care. To get 3 shutouts in one NFL season is impressive stuff. It doesn't make you the best defense in the league guaranteed, but it does probably make you a damn good one and probably an elite one, because 3 shutouts, that means for 180 minutes, 60 minutes, 60 minutes, 60 minutes, the entirety of a game with all the ebbs and flows that can happen, the Ravens didn't allow a field goal, didn't allow a touchdown, a safety, nothing. No pick sixes, nothing. Crazy. And as the season went along, you started to get a feeling about the Ravens at least a little bit that, hey, they're not great, but maybe they could at least be a playoff team, which would seem to make this a somewhat successful season. And it felt like Flacco and the offense was starting to get going a little bit better as the season kind of progressed, and it did. Alex Collins, who the Seahawks just kind of discarded, comes in, and he was a bit of a revelation in that running game, somebody I was pretty high on coming out of Arkansas, and it was good to finally see him get an opportunity, and I felt he did relatively well in that opportunity. But the Ravens sitting there at 7-5, with kind of how soft and weak the AFC was this year, it felt like they were in really, really good position to get in the playoffs. And when you got to week 17, they're sitting there at 9-6. They've got the Cincinnati Bengals, who are playing for nothing, and at the time you're thinking Marvin Lewis might be coaching his last game. For the Ravens, it's basically win and you're in. You know, with other things that could happen, whatever. But ultimately, you've got to be able to handle your business. And you wouldn't really be able to see any way that the Ravens couldn't ultimately handle their business. But they didn't. They go into that Week 17 game against Cincinnati and were really flat. Were kind of constantly, it seemed like, trying to dig themselves out of a hole. And when they finally did dig themselves out of that hole in the fourth quarter, they allow Andy Dalton to clutch mode on him and throw a big touchdown pass to Tyler Boyd. Therefore, the Ravens are out of the playoffs. The Bills are in the playoffs. How about that shit? Not all 9-7 seasons are the same. And for the Ravens, this is one of these really crappy years because you went 9-7, but you didn't get into the playoffs. So you're picking in the middle of round 1, and you have no postseason berth to show for it. That sucks. That's, to me, like the worst place you could be as an organization. And that's really who the Baltimore Ravens are. When you look at that team, you just look at them and you feel like that's an average, mediocre team. And that's exactly what they are. And it's hard to envision going forward into this offseason that things are going to change or going to get a whole lot better. They don't have a ton of salary cap space. I think they have something like $14 or $15 million. Again, you're quarterback by Joe Flacco, so you have an average NFL quarterback. That offensive line, Marshall Yanda got hurt this past season. That didn't help. You had John Urschel retire. That doesn't help. You allowed Ricky Wagner to leave in free agency. That doesn't help. There's all these different things. How much longer can Terrell Suggs play at a high level? He's already in, his damn mid-30s. It's incredible. Absolutely incredible. You've got Eric Weddle back there at safety. How much longer is he going to be a productive player? A lot of questions for this team. And you got free agents like Mike Wallace and Ben Watson. Maybe you throw in like Michael Campanaro. It's hard to see where this Ravens team gets a whole lot better. And I don't know that they will. They don't have a ton of money to spend in free agency. I don't know that they have a bunch of young stallions waiting in the wings to take over and take this team to another level. I just don't see that happening. Because the real truth of the matter is, in recent years, the Baltimore Ravens drafts have been somewhat lacking. And that is the truth of the matter. They've been somewhat lacking. And you start to get to a point where you wonder, are you kind of getting to that wind down point? Are you kind of getting to an end of the road for John Harbaugh? And potentially, crazy as it is to say, it seems like Ozzie Newsome. And I think the answer is maybe time has kind of run its course. And there's nothing wrong with stability, especially with the quality of stability that those two guys brought the organization for so many years. And they've been good at what they've done for so many years. But for John Harbaugh as a coach to go in and play Cincinnati in Week 17 when you basically end up playing out where you win and you're in and you lose in that crushing, devastating fashion, and it's your defense that sinks you, not your offense, that just can't happen. And when you're Ozzie Newsome and you look at what they've got outside at wide receiver, and you've got old guys, frankly, in Wallace and Macklin who have seen better days. Rashad Perryman's been a complete bust. Max Williams has been a complete bust at tight end. And there have been some bad busts there. And then you're allowing guys constantly every year to leave in free agency. You're not adequately replacing them. At what point in time is it the end of the road for Ozzie Newsome too? Nothing is forever in the NFL. Nothing. And as a result, there's a life cycle. Some people, some organizations, some teams, some general managers, coaches can have very, very short life cycles, and some can have very, very long ones. But at some point in time, you're in that one position in that one place for so long, it can start to create bad habits. You could start to get a little too full of yourself, a little too confident in yourself, and you make mistakes. And that's what it feels like I'm seeing here with the Baltimore Ravens and who they are as an organization now. So, going into this offseason, looking ahead to the NFL draft, they're kind of basic. I'm sure they'll have compensatory picks coming up, so, like other teams do. But the Ravens will, because they always allow people to leave in free agency. But they've got, as of right now, as of this recording, a pick in each of the 7 rounds. They've got the 16th overall pick in round number 1. So they're right there in the middle of the road for a middle-of-the-road football team. And it's crazy with the quality that their defense has shown that they can be. You feel like with Alex Collins in the running game giving them something that if they got a little bit more, this is a team that can match up well with others in the playoffs and a team that could potentially make a run. And that's not entirely crazy to think, but it doesn't seem like it's as close as maybe it should be. Number one need for this team, though, in the draft, they have to get a number 1 wide receiver. Perryman's a bust. Time to move on. Period. Wallace, Macklin, are you really going to be confident rolling with them long term? No. They need somebody explosive. They need somebody dynamic. They need somebody in Baltimore that can be a top flight weapon. Because the one thing Flacco can do is bomb the ball down the field. They need somebody that can hit some home runs. They need somebody that can make some big plays. They need to stop getting all these singles hitters and maybe the occasional double in the gap guys. They need to get guys that can hit powerful doubles and triples and home runs at the wide receiver position, and they don't have them right now. I feel like they could use some depth inside at offensive guard. Again, Yanda's not going to play forever. And at some point in time, even if he does, Ozzie probably let him leave in free agency too. They need somebody young at the tight end position because who do they really have there right now? Ben Watson got a lot of tick this year. Again, Ben Watson in his 30s got a lot of tick this year. And then you got to start thinking about the future at the quarterback position. Because Flacco is not elite. Flacco is hardly a franchise guy. Again, Flacco is an average, middle-of-the-road NFL starter. It's not to crap on the dude because he's made a crap ton of money and he's got a Super Bowl ring. He came through at times for his team in that 2012 season and in that playoff run when they really needed him to. So it's tough because he's been the starter for a decade. You know, there's history there and all that. But I know deep down a lot of Ravens fans aren't very big on Joe Flacco. They feel like he's a guy that's weighing them down and holding them back. And when you start to think about it, as he gets older, a guy that isn't very mobile, you know, just at times, he's so incredibly inconsistent. What happens when age starts to catch up with him? You know, how much longer is that going to be? And when it does, he's going to fall off a cliff, and he's going to go from being average to being he shouldn't even be your backup or in the league anymore. And do the Ravens really have anybody young at that position? No. And perhaps by addressing that position at some point in time in the draft, you might get a little more out of Flacco by putting a little bit of urgency under him to say, hey, buddy, nobody's position is guaranteed here at this point, most certainly not yours. We need you to be better more consistently, or we will go in a different direction. If you get the gist of everything here for the Ravens, the primary majority of this draft needs to be devoted to the offensive side of the ball. And it should be, and I would expect it would be, but you never know. But it's crazy. Like 5, 10, 15 years ago, if you told me Ozzie Newsome was drafting for this type of team, I'm like, ooh, Ozzie Newsome's going to do some magic in the offseason. He's going to do some magic in the draft, and I might be thinking about the Ravens as a potential Super Bowl contender. But this is not 2005, 2010 Ozzie Newsome, you know, somewhere in that range. This is 2017 Ozzie Newsome. And at this moment, I don't know how much confidence I have in Ozzie Newsome to go out there and hit some big shots in the draft and bring in some big-time players that can take this team up another notch in 2018. I just don't know that it's going to happen.